Greetings, everyone. This is Trey Jadlow. It's the 20th of March, 2017, and I'm here with a new friend, at least on Hangouts, Kyle Cooper, whom I've been trying to get to come on for a long time. Finally got him to. Here, turn your volume down there. You don't have any headphones, do you?
The background. There we go.
Okay. We're still hearing the echo of what I'm saying on the delay. Maybe that's me. Is that me that's doing that?
I hear no echo.
Okay.
That's me.
Okay. Anyway, so I've been wanting to talk with you, Kyle, for a long time, so it's very nice to meet you face to face. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I live in Indianapolis here, have a family, married 13 years, pretty normal married dad life, I guess you can say. Like IndyCar racing, like fishing.
Cool.
Normal stuff. I'm a normal dude.
Okay, and you're an apostate Christian, though, right?
I'm not.
Oh, you're not?
No, I'm sorry. I mean, I wouldn't define myself that way, but you would. So go ahead.
Well, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? You were a professing Christian, and then you fell away from the faith, right?
Yeah, I did. I don't. I wouldn't, classify me how you wish.
Okay, well, that's just what apostate means. It's somebody who's a Christian and who denies the faith. So it's not necessarily a pejorative. It's just a descriptive term. Anyway, so you had this post on there with your hero Matt Dillahunty. You got a selfie with him down in Tennessee there, and you're real proud of that. And so I jumped in and challenged you, and you kind of did the Mexican hat dancing.
Sure. Yeah, we're breaking up a little bit. I don't know if you can hear me or not. Video seems to have died.
And so let's go ahead and start if we can. You're familiar with my argumentation.
Okay. I'm sorry, we were breaking up for a minute there, and I didn't hear the last thing I heard was my Mexican hat dance, and then we were breaking up for a second. So I didn't know if you had said anything.
Okay, I apologize. Let me turn down my internet may not be that good. I'm going to turn down my resolution a little bit.
Okay.
So Mexican hat dancing, and I persuaded you to come on and discuss our respective views.
Sure.
And you're familiar with my argumentation, I guess. How do you? I mean, I really don't know you.
Yeah.
Have you known me for a long time? Have you?
No, I don't. I was led to one of your videos by a Facebook buddy, and that was a few months back. I think we commented back and forth. That was the first time that you and I had any dialogue. But other than what, I don't even know that I've watched a full video of yours. Just from our comments back and forth is pretty much all I know of you. So, I mean, this is really hearing each other say our arguments and our views really for the first time. So
Okay.
I think obviously it's different when we're having a chat like this than it is commenting, because it's more productive anyway. So,
okay.
But yeah, go ahead. I am open to being convinced. I don't know that everyone is.
Well, I don't believe you are, because you've never dominated a conversation, and yet you don't want to change. That's why I've been teasing
sometimes
you.
Sometimes it's just about planting the seed. So maybe you've already planted the seed, and it just takes a while to grow. You know what I mean? So, I don't think I've ever changed anybody's mind on Facebook either. But
yeah, well, I'm pretty cynical because I've been doing this for years now, and I'm a little hardened because I get tired of the atheist crowd. I've done so many of these, and they all talk about how open-minded they are. I'm thinking of somebody right now, I won't mention his name, who's on Facebook, and he always likes to say, maybe you know him, make facts matter again. That's his hashtag that he's always doing.
I've seen
And
on a hashtag.
he's lost every single exchange, and he talks about how he's all about truth and wants to follow the facts wherever they go. And they all tell me that.
Mhm.
And then I've never been rebutted, and nobody wants to change your mind either. So I think it's rather humorous. But let's go ahead.
I've had enough conversations where you could almost flip that around and say, the theist is say they're open-minded and aren't either. It goes both ways.
Yeah, but the theists don't generally say that, though. They say they're not open to the facts necessarily, do they? They say they believe, even if they can be proven to be wrong, they say, oh, well, I still believe, right?
Sure. And, then they're obviously not believing for that particular reason that we were just discussing. So then you just move on to the next one. So go ahead.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't really have good justification for their perspective. And so,
I agree.
Anyway, so basically my argument is that, if you grant two epistemological foundations or presuppositions, basically the law of non-contradiction and the basic reliability of sense perception, we know that we as the inquirer exist. Otherwise, we wouldn't be asking any questions. And we know that we as the inquirer were born, that we happened, that we're not self-existent, we're not eternal. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the argument follows that there must be something that has the quality or attribute of self-existence in order to be contingent being, because if there weren't something self-existent, then we would have had to have made ourselves before we existed, thereby violating the law of non-contradiction. And that's it in a nutshell. And I was wondering what you thought about that.
Well, I wasn't self-existing. I'm not self-existing. I was born. My mom was born.
Right.
Her mom was born. We could go back.
As far as you want.
We could continue to go back. So I think your argument is saying, is just so I'm clear, is that you go back far enough and you reach a point where explain that point when you go back, to creation. You're probably a creationist. I take it. So you go back.
So you believe in a Big Bang?
Sure.
I think everybody probably I don't know. It's just Stephen Hawking said almost everyone now agrees that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. So they don't like it, but most people hold to. They would not use this terminology, but they believe in self-creation. Most skeptics, they won't say that, but every time they describe it, that's what they're talking about. I mean, if something exists, there are only four possibilities. Either it's an illusion, in which case that we wouldn't be asking this question, so that's not true. It's self-created, which is a violation of law of non-contradiction. Mm-hmm. It's self-existent, which means that it does not happen. It's not subject to anything. It's eternal, or it's created by something that is self-existent. And the only one of those are the only four categories, only four possibilities, and the last one is the only one that is viable.
So I'm gonna grant you the argument. So what happens next?
Okay, well, so that we know that that which is self-existent is personal, because unintentionality cannot intend intention. And since we are intentional dependent creatures, there must be a self-existent intentional creator.
How you need to say that again. I don't know that I agree with that.
Okay. If there is contingent intentionality, which I think you would grant, that you intended to have this hangout, you're intending right now as you're listening. Mm-hmm. If there's a contingent intentioner, there must be a self-existent intentioner, because unintentionality cannot intend intention into existence. It cannot give something that does not have. Like rocks cannot value humans into existence.
How did we determine that there was an intentioner?
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry?
How did we determine that there was an intentioner?
Because if a contingent intentioner exists, then a self-existent intentioner must exist. Otherwise, there would be no intention. It's a similar argument as ontology. as being?
Sure. So what attributes does this intention or have?
Well, it has the value of that it values existence. If there were no value to existence, then we would not exist because we were created, right?
How do you know?
Well, it's just a logical corollary.
If there now this goes back to, I guess, premise one, because if your intentioner has any attributes at all, then he is already. I say he pronoun. I don't. It must already exist. Therefore, it kills the first premise of the argument. So yeah, I'm granting you that argument, but then this next step, you've thrown intentioner. Does intentioner have a being? If it has any attributes at all, then we go back to your argument. Premise one is dead because that something already exists.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
Okay. You're saying the intentioner has some form of attributes, yes?
Yes, it has ontological status that is, yes, that it is definable.
What's the first premise of your argument?
That contingent existence exists.
That's the third premise, right?
No. What do you think the first premise is?
I was under the impression that your first premise was nothing can create itself. Maybe not.
No. You've got to no. As the inquirer, the very first line of inquiry that we have is we realize that we exist. So we know there's existence, and then we find out. That's the third. You got it backwards. The second premise is that we realize that we are dependent in our existence, and then thirdly, we conclude that self-existence cannot create itself. Well, actually, the third and the fourth premise would be there must be a self-existent being in order to bring about dependent being. Because if we're dependent, then we got to be dependent on something in order to have our existence.
So then what attributes does this self-dependent being have?
Well, first of all, it's a
any attributes at all, then he is clearly not self-existing. I mean, if this self-existing being has any attributes whatsoever, then it's special pleading at this point.
How so?
Well, nothing can create itself except for this one thing that is at the end of my argument.
No, it's not an arbitrary delineation here. Or an assertion. I'm saying that thing that I'm referring to is self-existent. You can't have remember the argument is something cannot create itself before it exists. You grant basic sense perception and the law of non-contradiction, don't you, as foundations?
Yes.
I've never had anybody question those. So
yeah. So, I mean, we can go on about sense perception, but I'm no good at that. I'm
not saying perfect sense perception because we don't. But it's all I'm saying is just enough to know that I, the inquirer.
I don't know that many people would argue that. I think I agree with the laws of non-contradiction and the sense perception. We're on the same page.
Even with a solipsis, that's fine with me. All I need is enough sense perception to know that I'm inquiring. And if somebody says, "Well, I don't want to give that," then say, "Well, then who's asking a question? What are we talking about?"
Sure.
And that was the first option I give, that everything is it's an illusion. But Descartes said, "Cogito ergo sum." I think, therefore I am. So if there is an inquirer, there is actually got to be something asking the question. So at the very beginning, this whole room, I'm talking to you, you could be an illusion, everything else could be an illusion. It doesn't matter to me. All I need is myself, enough to inquire about my own existence. And I know that I am contingent, that I'm dependent, because I change. I get sunburned, I stub my toe, stuff happens to me. Therefore, I know that I'm not self-existent. Given that, then I know that I have a reliance on something that does have self-existence. And I know also that I am an intentional being. And I know that intentionality cannot be intended by unintentionality. So my being had to be given that property of intentionality.
We're hung up on this again. How do we know that?
Because something cannot intend something unintentional. You can't have unintentionality. Let's say there's a state of being that is unintentional. It cannot intend intention into existence because it's unintentional. It's a
But-
violation of law of identity.
But can what it, I don't want to use this word, but what it created, could that have intention of its own? Here's what I'm saying.
Sure,
For example,
absolutely. But it can't be completely autonomous. It can have a degree, kind of like imagine a farmer over a chicken coop. The chickens can have their freedom or liberty, but ultimately, it's not an exact. Oh, sorry, it's not an exact one-to-one analogy, but certainly we have freedom within us. But even in our freedom, it must be under His sovereignty, if in fact He is the creator and the one who sustains us in all that we do.
So I'll grant you the argument again. We may have to revisit it. I think it's, honestly, I think it's just a play on words of, the kalam.
You always say that. So what? Okay, so it's a play on words for kalam. So what's your rebuttal?
That's been refuted. It's not a good argument.
Okay, tell me. That's what we're here for.
Sure.
I'm saying that, but you don't give actual argument. I don't even think you understand the rebuttal.
Probably not to the full extent that I could.
Matt Dillon, he talks really well on TV, therefore he's wonderful.
No, we, not even my hero and I see eye to eye on everything, but so I guess the problem that I have, my rebuttal is, and how do you connect at the end of it? Let's say I grant you the argument. How do we get from that to that? How the creator is the God of the Bible? I mean, I guess that's the bridge that we need to gap at this point. Because I can't. It's troubling to me. Okay, so maybe we have a decent. It's not the best argument. Maybe you have a decent argument for, universe is not self-existing, or the universe did not, create itself. I forget what the Kalam third premise is. Actually, I got it right here. Therefore, the universe has a cause.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what? So what? You're telling me that that cause is God of the Bible, Yahweh, Jesus, Holy Spirit, all in one. So how did you get there? How do you know that?
Okay. Well, we know that by way of the manuscriptural evidence that we have for the New Testament, in particular, we know that it has been demonstrated well through the manuscriptural evidence. We know that we have reliability of what was said is accurate. What we have is what was accurate as to what was said through the manuscriptural tradition.
The manuscripts are accurate to what was said during the time of Jesus?
Yes.
How do you know? How do you know that? So I guess now, how do you know that when you're talking about manuscripts that were, the ones that are 150 or 200 years after the fact? Are we talking about, we don't know who the authors of Matthew and Mark were. We talk about Luke. When was Luke written? 30, 40 years after the fact? How do we know those are accurate?
Well, Luke is considered to be, are you familiar with Sir William Ramsay?
No.
He was an archaeologist who lived in the 19th century, and he was taught in the liberal higher criticism that the book of Luke and Acts were written 100 years after the fact, when the events actually were purported, not when it took place, but 150 years after when they were supposedly written.
Sure.
And so
Luke mentions that he went around and he got eyewitness accounts and yada yada yada.
That's right. But higher criticism basically said no. That's not true. They were written probably 100 years or more after he wrote that. So Sir William Ramsay went to verified that, and he went to Palestine and devoted his whole life's work to demonstrating that the Bible was, basically fake, because he said if somebody's writing in a completely different time, that much later, there's no way they could get the archaeological data correct. And as you well know, in Luke, he talked about how he was very careful in the way that he wrote his account. And Sir William Ramsay went over to Palestine, and after extensive verification, he said Luke is a historian of the highest order. He said he was among the greatest historians of all antiquity. And he actually, after viewing the evidence, he actually became a Christian and devoted his life to Christ, because he said the accuracy is unparalleled in antiquity for what Luke said. So that's not to say that everything's exactly right, but we can say by the science of archaeology, Luke has been demonstrated to be a faithful recorder of the events that happened, and they had to happen within that period of time, because it's not possible for someone to be out of the milieu of what they're saying they're describing and be able to accurately describe it, because Luke was very careful. He's a physician. He's very careful in his details. And, do
you think that eyewitness accounts are accurate? And generally, if you witness a car accident and somebody comes to you 15 years later, do you think you're going to accurately depict what you saw that day?
Maybe not.
How good is eyewitness testimony?
But here's the thing: you've got eyewitness account that is corroborated by several people, and you've got something like sightings of the resurrection of Christ that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 15, where there are 500 witnesses, and he says, you don't believe me, go and ask them. He refers people to go and
we can't mix Paul's letters in with Luke. Those are written at a completely different time period.
No, we're talking about the witnesses of the actual accounts of what we're speaking about. And so Luke was a companion.
Does Luke? I need to look. I don't remember. Does Luke mention how many people saw the resurrection?
No, Luke doesn't. Paul does, but Luke was an amanuensis to Paul and a traveling companion to him. So he had a direct eyewitness to things that he was occurring. These didn't occur several years after. Luke was writing this stuff as it occurred. Keeping journals again when they're going on their when they're shipwrecked in late Acts, they make soundings and of hold on just a second.
That's fine.
Let the dog out. They took soundings for the depths of how far they were at, and he told where they were at. And like I said, Sir William Ramsay went and checked it out, and he goes, exactly right. Luke said there's a certain they were went to some island, I don't remember which island it was, and he said there was a particular type of constabulary leader there. And the Bible scholars that time said, oh, that doesn't exist. Well, in archaeology later, then I think it was Luke, Sir William Ramsay uncovered it and found actually, yes, that exact position was at that island, at what he said. So Luke has been found to be, like I said, of the great, he said you can push his narrative to the highest degree, and he will come out as a faithful witness in what he said. So we see Jesus, him writing things about Jesus that are, we can't say through archaeology, we can't say it's exactly word for word. We can just say the general, what kind of reliability is this witness that we have through Luke? Then we have Luke writing things about Jesus, saying these radical things about the Bible. Not one letter or stroke will pass away until all is accomplished. Jesus made these really radical claims and spoke of Moses was speaking of me, and he said the Psalms all spoke of me, and you should listen to them. So we see some very radical statements being made by Jesus about the accuracy of the witness that they had. And I think that, and he himself, of course, claimed to be God, and the promised, again, you have some Christian background, so you understand this. the promised Messiah. We know that in Genesis 3:15 there was a promised Messiah who would come, and he would be the seed of the woman, and he would crush the head of the serpent, and the serpent himself would bruise the heel of that seed. And we see that fulfilled in the Old Testament has many. And then we see later on that of Abraham. Abraham comes along and God says, "I'm going to bless you, Abraham. I'm going to make your I'm going to make you a blessing. I'm going to bless those that bless you, curse those that curse you. I'm going to give you this land, and I'm going to multiply your descendants so that there will be more than the stars of the heaven and the sand of the seashore. And through you, the entire world would be blessed." And then we see in Genesis 49 when let's see, who was it?
Hold that thought. Okay. Let's get back to the eyewitness accounts, and Paul had mentioned that 500 people saw the resurrection. If it would one day be, I guess one thing is it doesn't matter how many people claim to have seen something, that doesn't necessarily make it true. I think you would agree with that. But another question, if eyewitness accounts aren't as strong of a testimony, I don't know, that's not the right word I want to use. I'm short on my words here. If it turns out that the eyewitness accounts were wrong or not as accurate as we thought, I mean, would you change your mind on that? I mean, is that your, I guess, is the New Testament account of Scripture, I mean, is that where you really get your foundation from?
Well, yeah. No. I start out. Am I blocking up? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, my screen froze for a second. Okay, so my argument, I'm always going to start with, this is how I come to my Christian faith. It's going to start with the existence of God, and it's also going to start with.
You've always been a Christian? I'm
sorry?
You've been a Christian since were you raised Christian?
Yes, nominal. Okay. And then when I was 20, I was born again. I didn't understand the gospel until I was 20. Okay. And so I'm always going to come at two things. I know that there's a creator, and I also know that there's such a thing as right and wrong. And again, it's going to fall in the same thing. And I know that I don't hold to my own standards. I mean, I say it's the atheist. I say, forget about God. Let's talk about Kyle's standard of right and wrong. You have a standard of what you want to do with yourself, and you know that you do not keep the standard, even that you keep for yourself, that you break it.
Well, let's save the moral discussion for another day.
Well, you're going all over the place here. When we started with the ontological
argument. You're the one that just brought up more. I'm sorry. I'm asking you what your basis is, because when I asked you to connect. I asked you to connect your first argument, which I'm granting you for the time being. Mm-hmm. I think it's very interesting, but I'm going to grant you that. And then you went to the New Testament accounts as the link to those, and I asked you then if that is the basis for, and then you went to.
And I said the moral argument and an ontological argument of being. Mm-hmm. I mean, no sentient creature on this planet who can think about such things questions the fact that they are dependent for their existence. Nobody does. Now, the atheists, they suppress it, and they put up this facade and say, oh, I really don't know that. And then, again, nobody rebuts the argument. Don't tell me that that there is no God and that you're open-minded, and then tell me that you can't somehow justify contingent existence creating itself before it exists if you can't do that. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a big one, and it's like
it is, and we're going to revisit that. I came into the knowing that in the 5 minutes that I had to think before we got on here, the one thing I was going to do is grant you your first argument.
Okay.
Because it is. You're right. It is absolutely one that you have to think about, and I actually thought about it today. But I really wanted to bridge the gap between that argument and then how you know that it's God the Christian God that fills in that self-existing role.
Well, and there's no other worldview other than Christianity that adequately covers the idea of creation, fall, redemption, has an adequate view of metaphysics. I'm sorry?
That doesn't make it true just because there's nothing else currently.
Well, it sets it apart as it could all be a lie. It all could be false. But Christianity answers the question better than any other religion. Again, it's got all the components. Most of them don't even, like Buddhism doesn't even address the idea of God. And again, you've got to have creation. I'm sorry?
Yeah. That's not the same, Buddhism's not the same type of religion. I don't even know that I would necessarily call it religion, but more of a thought.
Well, whatever. Pick your own. I mean, the Islam.
Well, yeah, but just because it makes the most sense. I mean, we know that based on evidence and evolution makes the most sense by natural selection on how.
No, it doesn't. Evolution is stupid.
So, well,
how do you have evolution without an efficient cause?
Anyone that would just their first comeback is evolution is stupid clearly doesn't understand it.
Okay, prove me wrong. I mean, I say it all the time.
Sure.
How is it that unintentionality can make you an intentional being? Tell me that. There's no efficient cause. There's no valuer in the evolutionary paradigm. It's so stupid. Only it's from the 19th. It's a 19th century myth, and here we are still believing in the 21st century.
Oh yeah, people say that the human eye is. Hi, babe.
Hi.
You good?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
The human eye, way too complex. It's way too complex. Now you go back. Anyone that says that doesn't understand natural selection. They don't understand how it's a slow process of.
You're completely missing the point. I'm not saying anything about natural selection.
Okay, it's relevant, and here's why it's relevant. Because at some point, consciousness arose.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay? And
unintentionality intended it, right?
We don't know. We don't know. We're working.
It's a just so story. Let's read it.
But I'm not just going to put an answer in there.
You said it's the best answer. Give me the answer. I'm telling you.
I'm telling you the answer. I don't have the answer. I'm saying I don't know is my answer.
Okay, then don't tell me that you have the answer with evolution, because you just told me you don't know.
Okay, but that fits the best.
No, it doesn't. It's stupid, and I just told you it was, and you didn't rebut it.
Obviously, okay, so I'm just going to let's say it's stupid. I mean, you say it is. Now what?
Well, okay, well that's eliminated.
True, because does that make your claim true? Because here's the thing: if you were able to, which you're not, if you're able to disprove evolution, that says nothing about your claim.
No, but it does say something about a self-existent creator. That's the only other option. Well, so my disapproval of evolution is by way of saying. I'm sorry?
How do you demonstrate that that's the only other option?
Okay. Well, give me another option. I'm saying that there must be a self-existent a valuer who's creating value in his creation, because evolution cannot value anything. Therefore, there can be no value in it. So you as a valuer cannot exist. Tell me the tertium quid. What's the third way?
We're not going to use words of value. I mean, those are just, you're saying.
That's intentionality. Value, intentionality, whatever. Call it intentionality, whatever. Same thing.
But it's okay to say, I don't know. And we're working on it.
Yeah, I know. That's what you had. You have a big fat question mark, and I'm giving answers.
I know. And here's the thing, and this is what you get sometimes and you see it all over the internet, all sorts of videos, how somehow me saying I don't know is wrong because I don't have all the answers.
No, it's not impressive to me because I've got the answers and you're not rebutting them.
You're not convincing.
I know. I said because it's not about facts. That's what I said. That's how it always is with atheists. It's not about facts. It's about wanting to suppress the truth.
I'm saying I don't know, and all of a sudden, I'm ridiculed for saying I don't know. I think it's a noble answer.
No,
until I have a good reason.
No, you're ridiculed for refusing my answer without a rebuttal and just saying I don't know. That's what they always do. I do ridicule.
Why is that? Why is that a bad thing?
Because when you come in contact with facts that challenges your view, you should change your view.
Correct. You haven't given me enough facts to find convincing. You know, you yourself admitted that when talking about the New Testament, that eyewitness accounts may not be completely accurate. You're just going off of the fact that it probably could be.
How else are we going to have a witness from there? Did they have video cameras back then, or maybe there's?
Well, I don't know. So let's find another source.
What? Tell me, what kind of source? What would it take for you to be able to believe it then? In first century Palestine, what kind of testimony are you going to have other than eyewitness testimony?
Well, we know quite a bit from that time period, right? I mean, we know when there were historians writing things down. Now, I haven't read any of their things, but there were historians, and we do have dates for other things that happened. We have birthdays of people. We have
through eyewitness accounts.
Historians wrote that stuff down. There was some things important enough during that time period that someone actually wrote them down while they were happening.
So that's the best information.
60, 70 years later.
Okay, so that's the best information we have is eyewitness account.
So, but that would be two lines. That would be the person writing it down, the claim, right? Mm-hmm. And then we have other sources backing that up. So,
yeah, but you were questioning eyewitness account. That's what you were saying. We can't trust eyewitness account. And I'm saying that's all we've got. What else are you going to have in first century Palestine?
Well, archaeology. That would be another line.
But you're going to test that with the eyewitness testimony. That's what I've been doing.
Maybe Jesus would have written something down and we would have that. We don't
how would
have
you know Jesus wrote it?
Well, how do you know
his fingerprints?
How do you know who wrote it?
Well, we know that from the earliest part of the church that all the books were attributed to the authors that they have. From the very earliest of the church, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And I know they're high critics who question it, but we know that from the very earliest of times, and we know that we have better manuscriptural tradition than any other book of antiquity with the Bible.
You could have 2 million manuscripts of manuscripts. It does that. Come on now. They're just.
Okay, listen to this. All right, so let's say you have a class. Let's talk about how manuscript transmission in the New Testament. Let's say you have a class of 35 students, and you write down a page, or you tell them all to copy a page, from a Sears dishwasher manual or something, and they all copy it down, and every single one of those people are going to have a mistake in there. Mm-hmm. But since you've got multiple lines of transmission, 35, you can go back and you can collate those manuscripts that they have created, and you can get back to the original. Do you agree with that?
Probably close. You could probably get pretty close.
No, you could get 100% with 35 people. I would say back to the washer manual.
With one copy from the manual?
No, each one. Yeah, each one. 35 copies. 35 copies.
Sure. You're pretty close to 100.
Okay. So that's what we have with the Bible. And in the New Testament that we have 400,000.
But you're not starting with a manual. You're starting with Luke's eyewitness accounts 60, 70 years after they happened. So you're not starting with.
No, not 60, 70 years after they happened. Luke wrote these down himself. Now we have copies of that. But
I get that, but Luke wrote them down from his eyewitness accounts. Luke didn't copy them from a manual.
No, Luke was there. Luke was a companion of Paul. Now, in the book of Luke, yes, he was taking eyewitness testimony, multiple eyewitness testimony. But in the book of Acts, he's writing it. I mean, it's just like he was there. He was doing it. And there's continuity between both of those books. And he was a very careful historian. He was very intelligent. His Greek is very high. He's a very intelligent man, and he was very particular in the way he did his work. You know what, Kyle? I'm gonna have to cut this off. I gotta.
No, that's fine.
Some stuff. I go to bed tonight.
We'll continue this. I'm gonna work on your first argument because I don't know that I accept it yet, but I
think about it.
I do. I did today, so I appreciate it. And hit me up again. We'll do it again.
Okay. Well, Luke, you've been a great interlocutor. You're a lot more interesting than I thought you're going to be. So thank you for that. And I mean, you're kind enough to grant the premises and move on, and I appreciate that without just playing. A lot of guys, they do it. They'll just play games and won't
Yeah,
actually
I'm
be
not really
honest.
good with the word games. I'd rather just talk, like we're sitting having a couple of beers. So I think it helps the listeners and everybody else. So
Yeah, I think so too. It helps me, and
sure.
hopefully it
I
helps you
appreciate
too.
it. We'll do it
Okay,
again.
Kale. All right, we'll talk to you later then.
All right, bye now.
All right, blessings. All right, bye.